For our last video this week, we're going to look at how culture may change, and even more importantly for you guys as international business managers of the future, how it is likely potentially to change moving forward. There have been certainly a number of different perspectives on how culture may change within academic research, and we're going to have a look at a few of them today. And the first that we'll highlight here is the idea of cultural convergence. Now, this is the idea that cultures around the world are gradually becoming more and more similar, that they're coming together right now, even you might say, and certainly is underpinned by the notion of economic ideology as driving an individual and a culture's values. So it's this idea that common values in relation to economic activity and work-related behaviours are the key driver of a nation's culture. So proponents of cultural convergence will argue that, in line with what we talked about in last week's lecture videos, that as we see more and more nations around the world transition from that centrally planned economic system towards a free market capitalist economic system, we will also see more and more nations become gradually similar in terms of their cultural values. That is, that values and behaviour become similar to those found within a lot of the Western capitalist economies. What does this mean for international business? Well, at least in theory, it should lead to increased efficiencies. Obviously, if everybody is adopting the same economic perspective here, that is to try and enhance profitability and efficiency, that should mean that we work better together. And as a consequence, there should also be greater harmony within, not only within our organisation and the different employees, but especially as we look to expand internationally overseas, when we're dealing with our foreign trading partners. If everyone is pursuing the same economic perspective or adopting that same economic perspective, it should result in greater harmony in those negotiations and dealings. On the other hand, there is the issue of the potential loss of national identity. And this is an issue which has been discussed not only a lot in academic research, but even in general culture and society recently. There's a lot of concern over the last few years around the globe in terms of a potential loss of national diversity and variety, that we're losing our unique sense of self within our respective nations and what makes us special and unique in relation to other groups of societies around the world. In line with that, other theorists have adopted the view of cultural divergence, which is the notion that we're actually becoming less similar culturally around the globe. And as I say, a lot of this is underpinned by the idea that it's national culture, not economic ideology, which drives a society's values. And people who support cultural divergence as their perspective point to the EU as a great example here. And certainly you look at that, and it was certainly a man-made, a political union, which was moving towards an economic union, and certainly was adopting a lot of the same economic ideologies, and yet we saw significant evidence of cultural clashes and differences within the EU, which has led to a situation where we've now seen examples like Brexit and a lot of other groups within the EU trying to establish themselves and enhance their own national identities and highlight their differences rather than their similarities. And so people who support cultural divergence will argue that we're seeing this push towards differences within culture, even though there is this more common adoption of a free market thinking around the world, and that individuals will retain diverse, culturally determined values rather than economic ideology-based ones. What does it mean for international business? Well, certainly there is the question relating to conflict between cultures. Yes, it's great to have our own sense of national identity and how highlighting how our cultures are separate and unique and special. But if this leads to increased conflict amongst these, especially from an international business perspective, then this isn't really ideal. So it's something that we need to be especially conscious of as international business managers moving forward. There's also the concern about terrorism. A number of authors within academia and even just general society will argue that groups like IS effectively exist as a pushback, as a response mechanism to this push towards capitalist values across the world, and that their main reason for existence is to effectively oppose and to highlight their differences in relation to this dominant capitalist perspective that we now see around the world, this very much Western idea or economic ideology that we see across the globe today. So whether that's actually a good thing in terms of highlighting and promoting these differences across cultures is certainly up for debate and continues to be debated hotly moving forward. Finally, the idea in response to both divergence and convergence is this idea of cultural cross-vergence, and this refers to when an individual incorporates not just national culture and not just economic ideologies, but both of those synergistically to form a unique value system that is different from the value set supported by just national culture or just economic ideology. So it's this notion that an individual now will have their own set of values that isn't, or that is quite separate to their national culture, but also separate to this dominant economic perspective that we're seeing now around the world of capitalism. So that, of course, will present its own set of challenges for you guys as international business managers moving forward, to especially not just within your own organisation, managing a varied workforce, but also how you conduct your international dealings and negotiations with separate parties, by both respecting and honouring their national cultural identity, but also trying to promote that same and shared economic ideology. This is the sort of reason why international business is not only a challenging but very much a relevant unit for you guys as you seek to leave your time here at Monash and go out into the workplace.